your Elohim. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Numbers 10, 1 and 10. Blessed are the people who know the joyful sound. They walk, O Yahweh, in the light of your countenance. Says Psalms 89 and 15. The silver trumpet sounds distinctly different than the ram's horn. So he says, blessed are you if you know the difference in the sounds. Now, what happened on that first new moon, the moon of Aviv? Well, in Exodus 10:24, Moses and Aharon meet with Pharaoh. In Exodus 10:28 and 29, the prophecy of Pharaoh's death. In Exodus 11 and 8, Moses leaves the meeting with Pharaoh in anger. In Exodus 11 and 1, Yahweh tells Moses about the last plague. In Exodus 11, 2 through 3, Moses is told to tell the Israelites to collect the spoil from the Egyptians. In Exodus 11, 4 through 7, the destruction of the firstborn and Israel's protection is foretold. In Exodus 12, 1 through 2, the month of Aviv is the beginning of your months. In Exodus 12, 3 through 5, the Israelites are instructed to select the lamb on the 10th day to be kept until the 14th day. In Exodus 12 and 6, the lamb is to be sacrificed on the 14th day. In Exodus 12, 7 through 11, the instruction for the Passover ceremony and meal was given. In Exodus 12, 12 through 13, the destruction of Egypt's firstborn is foretold again. In Exodus 12, 14, the day the Israelites leave Egypt is to be remembered as a memorial called Passover. In Exodus 12, 15 through 20, the festival of unleavened bread is explained. This was all given on the first new moon of Aviv, once the command was given by Yahweh to commemorate it as Rosh Hashanah. So, what happens on Aviv 1? It's supposed to be the day the priests prepare themselves for Passover in accordance with the Torah. They were to get the brazen altar ready to slaughter the sacrifice. And that sacrifice was to cleanse the priestly family, and it was done by a bullock. The blood was collected from the bullock and was placed on the mantle of the temple. Thus says the sovereign Yahweh, in the first month, on the first day of the month, you shall take a young bull without blemish and cleanse the sanctuary. The priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the doorpost of the temple, on the four corners of the ledge of the altar, and on the gatepost of the gate of the inner court. And so you shall do on the seventh day of the month for everyone who has sinned unintentionally or in ignorance. Thus you shall make atonement for the temple. Ezekiel 45, 18 and 19. So some of that blood was then put upon the mantle of the temple, like at the first Passover. My clicker's not working exactly right. In fact, the Torah requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness, says Hebrews 9:22. Okay, so that was the first day. A week later, on Aviv the 7th, sunset Tuesday to sunset Wednesday, this is what the sovereign Yahweh says. On the 7th of the month, for anyone who sins unintentionally or through ignorance, take a young bull without defect. The priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the doorpost of the temple, on the four corners of the upper ledge of the altar, and on the gateposts of the inner court. So you are to make atonement for the temple. Ezekiel 45, 18 and 20. So what are unintentional sins? Sins of omission. They're oops, mistakes, things you didn't know to be sin, but found out later they were sin. So this isn't for intentional sin. This is for unintentional sin or ignorance. You do not delight in sacrifices, or I'd bring it. You do not take pleasure in burnt offerings. My sacrifice, O Elohim, is a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. You, Elohim, will not despise. May it please you to prosper Zion, to build up the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight in the sacrifices of the righteous. Many people will quote the first part of this passage and say, see, Yahweh doesn't want sacrifice. No. Yahweh wants sacrifices because Yahweh commanded them. He doesn't want sacrifices from people that are not repentant. You must have a broken and a contrite heart, a repentant heart, then Yahweh will accept your burnt offerings. And then the bulls will be offered on your altar. Psalms 51, 15 through 19. The problem was, this had been stopped. King Hezekiah suspended the Aviv 1 and the 7th cleansing because of the failure of the priesthood to sanctify themselves. For they could not keep it at the regular time because a sufficient number of priests had not consecrated themselves, nor had the people gathered together at Jerusalem. See, we're commanded 3 times a year to gather at Jerusalem. Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, the 3 pilgrimage feasts. The people had ignored the Passover. Can you believe it? It did not come to consecrate themselves. Nor had the people gathered together at Jerusalem, and the matter pleased the king and all the assembly, so they suspended it in 2 Chronicles 30 and 3. For 400 years, they had not cleansed the temple. Hezekiah became king in 715 BCE. When he was 25 years old, he suspended the cleansing ceremony because a sufficient number of priests had not consecrated themselves, and the edict stood for over 400 years. 29 years later comes the Babylonian captivity, and it lasted 70 years. But the close of the book of Malachi, the nation of Israel is back in the land of Judea, but they are under the domination of the great Medo-Persian Empire. Within the restored temple, the line of the Aaronic priests was still worshiping and carrying on the sacred rites as they had been ordered to do by the Torah. There was a direct line of descendancy in the priesthood that could be traced back to Aharon. The temple was still the center of the Jewish worship. However, Ezra had set synagogues in every Jewish city. The royal house of David had fallen. The people knew who was the rightful heir to the throne was. His name was Zerubbabel, the royal prince, yet they were a puppet nation under the domination of Persia, with the royal family exiled to Galilee. When the time had fully come, Yahweh sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the Torah, Galatians 4:4. In other words, the time of Yahweh's appointed hour, the moment for restoration of the kingdom had come. The crown prince had arrived to restore everything from the ground up. That brings us to Aviv 9. The 9th day of the month of Aviv, sunset Thursday to sunset Friday. Yeshua entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus is not a Hebrew name. The E-U-S is a Greco-Roman additive. His name was Zacchaeus or Zachariah. He was the chief tax collector and was wealthy. He became a collaborator with the Romans, and so they had renamed him to Zacchaeus. He wanted to see who Yeshua was, but because he was short, there's nothing wrong with that, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Yeshua was coming that way. When Yeshua reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he was gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the king, look, sovereign, here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay it back 4 times the amount. Yeshua said to him, today, Yeshua, or salvation, has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. Luke 19, 1 through 10. He knew he was a collaborator. He knew he was a cheat. But he was a broken and a contrite spirit. And he said, I know that I've done wrong, and I will pay. I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, and I will pay back 4 times the amount I've cheated. It wasn't what he did, but the reason he did what he did that Yeshua said, you're saved. Salvation has come to you. Because he was a broken and a contrite, repentant sinner. And then he established this man too is a son of Abraham. In other words, what was the Abrahamic covenant? By the end of days, all the families of the earth will be mixed into your family. Yeshua said, I've come to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Though Zacchaeus was living in Judea, he didn't have Israel in his heart. He had Rome in his heart. He had to come out of Rome, and the way he did that was he repented and took his lot among the saints, amongst the chosen. And what did Yeshua say about this example? He said, the Son of Man has come to seek and save not who was lost. That would have been a prime place to say that. That's what Christianity says he came to do, to save who's lost. It's not what the Word says. I have come to seek, to find, to look, and to save what was lost. What did Israel lose? It lost its kingdom. Yeshua was coming to restore the kingdom. It's the first time Messiah Yeshua proclaims he's come to restore the lost kingdom. For I will give the command, and I will sift the people of Israel from among all the nations as grain is shaken in a sieve, and not a kernel will reach the ground. Amos 9:9. So Yahweh has given the command, and Yeshua is calling us to sieve Israel from out of the nations. That's our job, is to find who's Israel and who's not. Messiah passes Thursday night at the house of Zacchaeus. While they were listening to this, he went on to tell them a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and the people thought that the kingdom of Yahweh was going to appear at once in Luke 19:11. From the days of Yohanan HaMetbil, or John the Baptist, until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Matthew 11:12. So Yeshua says that his kingdom is coming, and he will take that kingdom by force. That's interesting because he's always portrayed as what? A man of peace, isn't he? A pacifist. Usually they show him as a good shepherd. There's been a lot of people that refuse to serve in the army because they consider themselves Christ-like by being a pacifist. That couldn't be further from the truth. It just wasn't time. When it's time, the violent will take the kingdom by force. He said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So he called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. Put this money to work, he said, until I come back. But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. He was made a king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, Sir, your mina has earned 10 more. Well done, my good servant. His master replied, because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities. The second came and said, Sir, your mina has earned 5 more. His master answered and said, you take charge of 5 cities. Then another servant came and said, Sir, here is your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take out what you didn't put in. You reap what you did not sow. And his master replied, I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in and reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit so that when I came back I could have collected it with interest? Then he said to those standing by, take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. Sir, they said, he already has 10. And he replied, I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. Luke 19:20-27. Do you think the judgment will be harsh on Herod? Do you think it'll be harsh on Ananias? Do you think it'll be harsh upon those Roman soldiers that beat him? In fact, it will be harsh on anyone that did not want King Messiah Yeshua to be king over them. After Yeshua had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany, at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it, bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? Say, the king needs it. Luke 19:28-31. He didn't say what king. He just said the king needs it. Oh, the king needs it. You can have it. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Yeshua sent 2 disciples, saying, go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Now this one gives a little more information. Not only are you get the donkey, but the colt too. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone asks or says anything to you, say that the king needs them, and he will send them right away. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Zechariah. Say to a daughter of Zion, see, your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey and a colt, the foal of a donkey. Zechariah 9:9. The disciples went and did as Yeshua had instructed them. Matthew 21:1-6. Notice, goodness gracious. Notice there are 2 animals, a donkey and a colt of a donkey. They brought the donkey, the colt, and placed their cloaks on them for Yeshua to sit on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, Hoshenu ben David, save us, son of David. In other words, the crown prince. Baruch haba b'shem Yahweh, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. Hoshenu el Elyon, save us, Most High. When Yeshua entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? And the crowd answered, this is Yeshua, the prophet from the place of the branch, or Netzaret, in Galilee. Matthew 21:7-11. So what is a Netzer? He came from Netzaret, the city of the Netzer. What is a Netzer? It's the branch. The branch of what? The branch of the house of David. Jesse was the father of David. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. Isaiah 11:1. Now, anyone that's ever tried to cut down a tree knows exactly what I'm talking about. You cut down that tree, you think it's gone, maybe a season or 2 goes along, and then suddenly what happens? A shoot comes up out of there, a branch. Well, they have destroyed the house of David. There has not been a king. And so they thought the monarchy was destroyed. By occupation and occupation after that, they thought they had totally destroyed the house of David and the monarchy forever. They counted Jesse's house dead. But a shoot came up. Yeshua. He went and lived in a town called Netzaret, the place of the branch. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be Netzari, the branch. Matthew 2:23. Yeshua entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, he said to them, my house we've called a house of prayer, in Isaiah 56:7, speaking of the three things that please Yahweh. Keep my Sabbaths, love my name, and hold fast to the covenant. If you'll do that, then my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. But they're not doing it. They're turning the temple into a den of robbers, fulfilling the prophecy of Jeremiah 7:11. The blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the rabbis of the Torah saw the wonderful thing he did, the children shouting in the temple courts, Hushenu ben David, they were indignant. Do you hear what these children are saying? They asked him. Yes, replied Yeshua. Have you never read? From the lips of children and infants, you, Yahweh, have called forth your praise. Psalms 8:2. Matthew 21:12-16. And he left them and went out of the city to Bethany, where he spent the night. Matthew 21:17. So he cleanses the temple, that first entry into Jerusalem. Well, we know how he does it. He whips them and drives them off the Temple Mount. Why? Because he's surrounded by his 70 armed disciples. He is a militant king. I must remind you that Yeshua was a Jew. You'd think that just goes without saying, huh? But this is the most controversial and offensive statement for the Orthodox Christian, and the Jew, for that mistake. Yet something so ridiculously obvious. The Jews have distanced themselves from Yeshua and refused to own him as a Jewish, ultra-Orthodox rabbi. Gentile prejudice has not only made Yeshua out to be a Western Christian, but also a white, blonde, and blue-eyed Jesus. Giza Vermes was reprimanded by the chaplaincy at an English university for suggesting that Yeshua was a Jew. Now, Giza Vermes is a Hungarian Jewish biblical scholar. On the other hand, Hans Küng, the German Catholic theologian, proclaimed that Yeshua was a Gentile based on the Immaculate Conception of Mary because his, and I quote, Mother Mary had no physical and moral connection with those ugly dispositions and powers which we condemn in those who are full-blooded Jews. End of quote. Now, Hans Küng didn't say this in a Nazi court. He said this in a major university today. Troubling to the church officials is how their Savior is so attached to his own people who are supposed to be rejecting him. And equally as troubling to the Orthodox Jew is that he is in agreement with most of their teachings, including the militant view of the Davidic family that have been carefully hidden and glossed over. Especially embarrassing to supporters of church orthodoxy are militant images created by King Messiah Yeshua, who told his followers to equip themselves with swords in anticipation of trouble. He said to them, but now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. If you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. It is written, and he was numbered with transgressors, in Isaiah 53:12. And I tell you that this must be fulfilled in me. Yes, what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment. The disciple said, see, sovereign, here are 2 swords. Well, that's enough, he replied. Luke 22, 36 through 38. That would be akin today for Yeshua saying, you got a gun? Oh, you don't have a gun. Sell your coat and buy one. You're going to need it. Trouble's coming. Does that make you nervous? Well, you're Texans, for goodness sakes. It'll make a lot of people listening to the broadcast very nervous because, especially in this climate today, people are becoming anti-gun because they're fools. Only a fool does not equip himself for protection. Are you listening to me? I'll tell you this. When they outlaw guns, outlaws will be the only ones that'll have guns. Yeshua said, buy a sword and follow me. One of the disciples says, I got 2 swords. He said, that's enough. He'll use those swords later on, won't he? We know who it is. It's Kepha. Kepha had 2 swords, and he knew how to use them. Luke 22, 36 to 38. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. But isn't that what Christianity says he did? He came to bring peace. Not wimpy peace. Not passive peace. You can't have peace without security. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. And he's quoting Micah 7:6, Matthew 10, 34 through 36. Let me be frank with you. Our message divides families. It just does. Am I telling the truth? When are you worshiping? Saturday? What are you, Seventh-day Adventists? No. Well, then why are you messed up on your day? I've had people tell me that. Why are you messed up on your day? I'm not messed up. You're messed up. I just got fixed. You're still messed up. Are you keeping the law? Don't put me under bondage. The law's not bondage. If it was, our founding fathers, who was all about liberty, weren't they? Give me liberty or give me death. By the way, that was said on this day. It's the anniversary of that statement. Give me liberty or give me death. They knew there is no liberty without boundaries. You got to have law. We're not a nation of people, our founding father said. We're a nation of laws. It is freedom to know the boundaries. Amen? You're holding on to the covenant? Oh, you mean the New Testament? No, I mean the New Covenant. Oh, the one made with the church? No. No, see, you're messed up on that. Not only messed up on your day, you're messed up on what the Word says. The Word says the New Covenant is made with the house of Israel. Well, I'm not going to be Jewish, I'll tell you that. I don't even like Jews. Well, then you're anti-Semitic, aren't you? And not only that, if you're anti-Semitic, you're anti-Yeshua. Because here it is, earth to you, Yeshua was Jewish. No matter what Hans Kung says. No matter what Martin Luther said. No matter what the Catholic Church says. Yeshua is not Syro-Aryan. He is Jewish. In fact, he's a Jewish Jew. He's from the house of David. You can't get more Jewish than that. Are you listening to me? Several of Yeshua's disciples were known as zealots. For example, Shimon, the zealot, in Luke 6:15, was Rabbi Shimon Kifa, better known as Peter Bar Jonah. The term Bar Jonah in Matthew 16:17 is a derivation of Bar Yonah, Aramaic for an outlaw, which was a common name applied to zealots. Jacob and Yohanan, or James and John, shared the nickname Boanerges, or in Hebrew, Bnei Ra'ash, which is to say, sons of thunder, another common zealot reference. Now, this is a reproduction of a sikha, a Roman-era dagger used by robbers and assassins and zealots. It was a short sword, really, and they kept it under their cloaks, and they would come up behind a person, usually a Roman, and shove it into them and pull it out, leaving them to bleed out and die, and no one was of suspicion from them because they faded right back into the crowd. Having arrived at the Mount of Olives, Yeshua stationed himself with his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane, the Garden of the Olive Press. Now, this is located traditionally at a spot at the foot of the Mount of Olives. You remember that, Steve? That's not the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane is round that back part. You can go back up on the hill there and go around, and there is literally a cleft. And there is an olive grove, it's still there, an olive grove in that horseshoe area. That's the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, you can see it by a low depression or spur of the mountain. Now, here's what was amazing to me. I was traveling to Dallas the other day, and I saw a billboard. Christ is coming and will step on the Mount of Olives August the 2nd, 2013. I guess those guys are up to their old tricks, which literally means the second coming will happen on August the 2nd, 2013. No, it's not going to happen. Zechariah's prophecy says that Messiah's feet would stand on the Mount of Olives, which would split in an earthquake towards the east and the west, the bulk of the mountain removing to the north and to the south. The prophecy goes on, and yea, shall they flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains. Zechariah 14:3 and 4. Yeshua, therefore, took his disciples to that spot indicated by Zechariah the prophet, where he would one day perform this miracle. Now remember, Yeshua doesn't know the day or the hour for the kingdom to come. He doesn't know how many advents he's going to. All he knows is that he must continue to do the will of the Father. And the Father is positioning him like a chess piece on a board. He knew that one day he would perform that miracle of splitting the Mount of Olives. And so he takes his place there across from the temple. Yahweh my Elohim shall come if all with you are holy, says Zechariah 14 and 5. That's why he tells them, stay here and don't sin. Stay holy while I go and pray. In other words, Yahweh himself would join the Messiah in the valley and fight against the enemies by smiting his ranks with a plague. Other startling miracles would occur. Living water would go out from Jerusalem in 2 rivers, and at the evening time it shall be light. This is what the prophecy says. On that day, Yahweh will be king over the whole earth. On that day, Yahweh will be one, and his name the only name. Zechariah 14 and 9. So we have the Messiah. He's now stationed. He's made his triumphant entry, the first one. He's cleansed the temple, the first time. He sets his camp in the cleft of the rock on the Mount of Olives, and he's waiting for Yahweh to perform this miracle. He's ready to fight to bring the kingdom by force. We will leave it here. We will take a break, and during the Torah class, I will come back and I'll tell you some more of the story. Would you like that? All right, let's all stand. The humble will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek